Oh gosh, my face is huge. I got to back away from the computer. Oh yeah.
Is that helpful?
No, just be where you normally are.
Yeah.
I just was, my eyes. I think it's time for me to get my. Oh, by the way, welcome to the After Service Podcast.
Oh, good morning, everyone, or afternoon or evening.
Yeah,
wherever you are. Yeah,
it's time for me to get my eyes checked again because I find myself doing.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know. Getting older. Look at the hair. I mean,
Kathy just had an eye doctor appointment that was really helpful. She's been seeing double vision for a long time, and something, and this doctor realized, okay, normally eyes, when they cross to give you double vision, it means they're looking this different directions this way.
Mm-hmm.
Hers, which they didn't realize, is looking different directions. One's up, one's down.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that, he says, I think I can fix it then, because that's what's happening.
Yeah.
You thought? Yeah.
The eyes are such an important indicator of health that oftentimes when you go to an optometrist, they're able to identify other potential issues throughout your body that result in you connecting with your regular primary care physician to explore. So,
yeah. So, yeah. So that she was excited about that. That was like, oh yeah, cool. So yes, you probably need to get your eyes checked.
Yeah. Well, we actually have vision benefits.
Oh yeah. Same.
Yeah. Kind of nice.
Kind of nice. So yeah. I don't think it's going to snow on Sunday. It was going to earlier this week.
Oh, well, now you got me wondering. All right, hold on. I'm going to look at my phone, people.
Yeah. Like Monday, it was saying, probably snow this coming Sunday, but I don't think it is anymore. At least not in Aurora.
Yeah. Westland, frozen mix. So there should be some. It's next week where Tuesday and Wednesday, 70% chance of snow. But
change. No, we know this.
Yeah.
It's 70% today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait 5 more days. Let's see if that's the case.
The thing about snow, and I know we're going to talk about happiness and joy today, is that to me, snow represents something to celebrate in narrow corridors, right?
Yes.
Right? It's like I like to drive to it and then to leave it. Yeah. When it snows around here, it's like, wow, this is pretty. Mm-hmm. Now I have stuff to do. You should go away now. Go away. Thank you.
Yeah, it's lovely in like for a day.
Yeah.
And then go away. And I've said this for years. You and I can feel the similar. It's like, I like winter if it was like 2 weeks. 2 weeks of cold and a couple of days of snow, and then it goes right back into spring. That would be fantastic. I would love it.
Well, if it was more like year-round school, where like, the whole idea behind year-round school is that you've got a term, it's like 2.5 months, and then you've got a couple, 2 or 3 weeks off, and then it's cyclical. So what if it was like every 2 months you got 2 weeks of spring, 2 weeks of summer, 2 weeks of fall, 2 weeks of winter, and just rotate, you know?
That's great.
Yeah.
I would love the changing of the seasons, and
Yeah.
and maybe that's a little bit where we live. That are really fall and winter can be almost identical here at times. So it's a bunch of gray, drabby rain,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's not fun. So, but I've sure loved this winter, the snow in the last couple of days. Just makes you want to sing "Here Comes the Sun." And
You said snow, but you meant sun.
no, well, I
You said,
did.
yeah, you said I've
Yeah,
really
here comes
enjoyed the
sun.
snow.
I've enjoyed the sun
Yeah.
this last week or two.
Yeah.
It's been gorgeous. So, but we should probably transfer and start talking.
Yeah.
So we're going through this little book right here, which is a mini version of a full book by the same guy, Randy Alcorn. And and we haven't had a chance to really talk since we started working on this. And I said last time that he needed a better editor. And now that that was a conclusion I remember I came to after reading the full book, and I couldn't remember exactly what my problem is. Well, now I remember what the problem is he doesn't make his case logically, sequentially, carefully. He just makes a bunch of assertions and he throws in arguments here and there, but it's not carefully laid out. And that's what it means is his case could be much stronger, much more persuasive. And for many people, I suppose the argument that God is happy and he wants us to be happy is an obvious thing. But for some, that is not the case. Whether you're from in some cases, like for example, a very conservative fundamentalist viewpoint, where no, happiness is not something you would ever use to describe God, or for those who've been hurt by the church, and for some of those, it's like no, God's mean and abusive. It's like happy. I would never describe the God of the Bible as happy. And so for especially those people, this is a really big deal. Can we truly describe God as this fundamental attribute as happy? And so I think he would do better making a more careful argument.
It's, I think the timing of the conversation is great. A few days ago, I watched a talk from a demographer, somebody who studies demographics. I think that's the right term, but a demographics expert talking about, because there are people are having fewer children, that the average age of the people in the United States is actually growing older.
Yes.
And so there's a large body of people from let's say a faith perspective, a Christian faith perspective, that grew up with a more stoic perspective on what faith was. Whereas, and you and I were kind of in the middle of that, where there was a transition where you had some late 70s, some really joyful music that came out of that. And we've been, there's a generation that's younger than us that have grown up with modern worship so it's not too foreign to them that God would dance, that God would sing, that he would enjoy these things, versus you should just kind of sit there and stare straight ahead and think very stoic, sober thoughts.
Very serious thoughts.
Yeah.
Very serious.
So I get what you're saying, is that change is hard. And when you've grown up in a culture that says this is what you do, even church pews, right? They're hard. They're they're not intended to be comfortable. They're intended to keep you. You're supposed to be a little uncomfortable, so you stay focused.
Stay focused, stay awake. Yeah, and that was very intentional by the Puritans. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't looked it up recently, but I doubt it's changed. I remember when I first got into this topic, I don't know, like 8 years ago, something like that. Back then, I remember just reading so many people who really believe that happiness is a dirty word for Christians, and that God does not want us to be happy. He only wants us to be holy. And by even frankly really good teachers. And I'm like, where are you getting this? It's not biblical. And so there are people who in our lives who like this stuff is obvious, but it isn't the case for everybody. And so we really need to be careful how we think through it. So,
Well, and if that's the filter or the lens through which you are viewing God, think about all the things that impacts. You were talking a few weeks ago just about, and I thought it was a great analogy. We talked a little bit about it after the service, but you were talking about, if you're at a friend's house and you need to get home, and for me, I was supposed to be home before it got dark, right? And so during fall and getting into winter months, that meant I had to be home by like 4:30. Well, that didn't make any sense to me. I wanted to hang out with my friends longer. So I would stay till the very last moment where I thought I could get away with it. And then I would run home.
right.
And in your analogy, it's like, okay, well, let's say you trip. You trip on a rock or like a big stick or something. You don't just like cease your progress, and like you don't decide, well, I guess I'm not going home now. And you don't like fixate on the stick and remain unmovable. You're like, okay, well, that hurt and that got in the way, and I still need to get home, and I'm still running that direction. And I thought that's wonderful, for people that are really struggling with how their sin or their past or whatever gets in the way. I think that also gets in the way of joy. Like if I'm not taking this seriously, then how much more likely is it that those things will creep back up again, and that will become an issue because I've been experiencing this happiness over here.
And so for that reason, and so many other just little ways, just the question of, is God happy, becomes so critical. And so what I thought we should do today is rather than go into all the implications, let's make sure we can lay clearly the foundation of, is God happy? Is God, and it gets into the word joy versus happiness, blessed. And some of that is just how do you define a word based on context, which it is surprising how many people, well, and this is so much true of so much hermeneutics or how you interpret the scripture. People just kind of turn off their brains when they go to the Bible and they don't actually think about it. So, and let me ask you this: if you were reading a book and you come up to a word that you did not know that word, how would you figure out what that word means besides going to a dictionary?
Well, it's the context clues, right? You're looking around it to see what, let's say within that paragraph, what it appeared the author was trying to say.
Right,
and,
the context,
right.
In terms of what's the gist of where he's going, yes.
And then the other thing I would probably do is I would look for etymology, whatever. I'd break down the word to see what other words might be related in there. Like you just used the term hermeneutics, right? And I went, okay.
Well, what is that word?
Yeah. So so it didn't jump out at me.
No, but for example, if people were to go to, and I use this one so easy for me, this is such a slam dunk for me. If you go to like John 16:22, I don't know if you want to do that, Joe, or not. But
yeah, I can look it up. Say again, John 16:32.
22.
16:22.
Okay. Now, if you just look at that verse, and it reads like this: So with you now is your time of grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. So, okay. So the larger context of this is he's talking about his death and resurrection. I think that, I mean, that's just, if we were to expand out. So he's talking about a circumstance that's going to happen. So there's circumstance involved, and that circumstance is going to cause grief. He's going to, and what is grief? Grief is sadness, right? It's pain. It's an emotion. It's caused by circumstances, right? Okay, and just if you see here, it's clearly contrasted with rejoicing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So whatever rejoicing is, or joy, because rejoicing means over and over again versus joy. That's where you can break a word apart. So joy, so whatever joy is got to be the opposite of grief, right? Isn't that what that seems to say?
Yeah,
or at least it's contrasted by that.
Within that passage, yeah.
Yeah, but there's others, but this is an example of that. So what is joy in this passage, basically? It's an emotion, probably, because otherwise it's got to be somehow the opposite of grief. It's got to be based on the circumstance. Clearly, it's based on the circumstance, because I'm going to see you again. So something will physically actually occur, a circumstance. It'll be an emotion. This is the kind of ideas what joy is.
Yeah. The way it's described there, the idea that like rejoice is like this continual experience of joy. It's not momentary. It's not temporary. And it's like, I think about a feast where the food never goes bad and is always replenished. Like,
yes,
nobody's going to take away your food because they could not possibly take away, or like nobody can take away, the water from the fountain, because the fountain is, or like your cup, even if your cup is broken, it's constantly being filled. Right. So same kind of thing in my perspective.
It's the same kind of thing. Right. So, I mean, but because some of the key arguments against what joy means is that it's not a circumstance. In fact, the little catchphrase I've heard is happiness has to do with happenings. Joy is something that's eternal. But that's not what it seems to be saying in that case. Joy is also because of a happening, right?
Yeah.
Right? Another one is Jeremiah 31, starting in verse 12, where he says, they will come with a shout of joy. So there's joy. And they will rejoice in the bounty of the Lord. And so there's a benefit they're getting. And it's coming from God. The grain, the new wine, the olive oil, the young flocks and herds, and it'll be like a well-watered garden, and they will sorrow no more. So joy and sorrow, again, is contrasted because of things that God provides. And then if you go down to 13, then young women will dance and be glad. Okay, obviously it's the same idea, right? Joy, gladness seems to be synonyms, but it continues. Young men as well as old, I will turn their mourning into gladness.
Mm-hmm.
And gladness is that not a synonym of happiness? I will give them comfort and joy instead of sorrow. I will satisfy their with abundance. So it's like everywhere you go, it's the same thing. The joy and happiness, biblically speaking, is the same, is very much synonyms. They're both based on happiness. They're both an emotion. And what we're supposed to have is it based in what something God does.
I think you could almost take, like, if you say that sadness is the opposite of happiness, and that grief is the opposite of joy, if you kind of looked at it that way.
Say that again.
Happiness and sadness.
Yes. Grief and joy. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that, because they seem to be in steps of intensity, right?
Right. Grief, something has been taken from you. Something that maybe has brought you joy has now been taken away. Yeah. It's intense. It's the opposite of being fortunate.
which is what people often talk about with blessed. Blessed means fortunate. Okay, yeah. But if you use that Old Testament, that old time word, and he talks about this in the book,
Mm-hmm.
that if we that is an old English word that we still carry into our Bibles. But if you look at the 18 something Webster's dictionary, what does blessed mean? It means happy because of God's blessings in your good things in your life. That's what it means. So why don't we translate it happy?
And I have a theory on that, but
I do too.
If it
Because it
doesn't,
won't sell Bibles.
and it doesn't fit our narrative,
doesn't.
right? We're so vested in so many ways in certain words showing up in certain,
That's
like
right.
we reject any reinterpretation that, frankly, is more accurate. The people that hang on to the King James version,
Right.
as that can only be the only accurate one, in spite of
Right.
the fact that it's been demonstrated that it has some inherent flaws in the translation. So,
in certain ways, verses have to be translated, like "For God so loved the world." We got to put it in that order, even though that, while technically accurate, is misleading in English. It doesn't mean so as in so much. It means just so as in this way, this manner.
right.
But that's not what Bible trade. But they're in the business of sell Bibles, so they don't want to change these things. So so they keep using the word blessed because that's what we want to hear. But that's not what we don't even know what that word means. It's even the word gay now means something very different than what it did when we sing that when the Christmas songs were up and we said, now we don our gay apparel. What does that mean? It means happy.
Yeah.
Back then it meant happy. That's not what it means today. Words change. So all of that is like just this basic understanding that joy is a circumstance, it's an emotion, and it's something that's the opposite of grief. Okay, and one of the synonyms for that is blessed. All needs to be said so that when you read in First Timothy that God is the blessed God or the happy God, it's like, oh, now what are we saying here? God is legitimately happy. Where you look at First Timothy or the Matthew 25, where he says, enter into the joy of his master. Well, what are we saying here? Or the Luke 15, where he says, I'm sorry, I don't feel like I'm teaching today, and it's not a conversation. I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. It's, I'll just jump in a little bit. This was a chapter that was striking to me in a couple of ways. One was, I hadn't really thought about that much that I can recall about happiness being an attribute of God.
Yes.
Because it's something that I would ascribe as a human emotion.
Not a divine emotion.
Not a divine emotion. I can see it in Jesus because, as an aspect of God, right? I can see it there. But then when I think about God, and this is part of maybe how I grew up, I think of stoic, I think of staid. He's there, but does he really experience emotions and stuff? Because I think we also tend to look at emotions in general as maybe flaws or weaknesses that are inherently human, versus a reflection of who God is.
Not quite sinful, but man, in that direction.
Yeah. We describe people.
Not biblical at all.
We'll say that person's really emotional, and we don't mean that in a positive way. Like for me, I'm very emotional. And by that, it's like I respond in a very sensitive way to other people and their circumstances. And like I watch a commercial and I will cry, or I'll watch something and I'll laugh. Very broad. I mean, I experience things very broadly.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like, just as kind of we started this conversation, that from a religious culture, we're saying, I don't think you should be doing that. And because we can't imagine that God would be doing that.
I remember being told specifically early in my Christian life by a Christian ministry that 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 emotions are essentially a tag on that you never pay any attention to. In fact, they're something to be doubted, constantly doubted. They're a tag on, and at the most you should reject what they have to say. Like, whoa, wait a minute here. Which, I mean, that brings us to a whole discussion of what are emotions and the role that they need to play in our lives, and that is something that we as Christians really have downplayed. What I find interesting, and you're so normal, Joe, so don't take this as a criticism, but you're right. People think, well, Jesus, I could see Jesus having emotions, but not God. Like, no, but we know our theology says that that if you've seen Jesus, you've seen the Father. So whatever Jesus is like, that's what the Father's like. So if Jesus has emotions, so does the Father. Well, so does the Holy Spirit.
If I could take that one step further, I think we're also accepting of the fact that God can be angry and that God can be sad,
but not joyful.
It's like, why would we assume that his emotions related to us are negative? He grieves,
only
he's
negative,
jealous, he's angry, he's sorry, he's sad, and it's like, wow, right. And as opposed to like is describing in the book, that when we, like, he takes joy in our worship and in our joy. It's like he sees his children and they're happy.
Yep. And a great verse for that, by the way, for those who want to look it up, is Zephaniah 3:17, where he says, he rejoices over you, which again is an emotion. It's based on a circumstance. It's the opposite of grief. So it's intense. Yeah. It's one of my favorite. Zephaniah 3:17 and along with the Psalm 16:11. These are amazing verses to me. At your right hand are pleasures. Pleasure. Do you understand? God wants to give you pleasure. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, but we want to, but he doesn't mean pleasure. No. He means pleasure. He means pleasure.
I think a lot of this comes from, I remember like Vanessa describing growing up in the church that she did, that that there were certain things you shouldn't do, right? Like you shouldn't dance because that could lead to something that could lead to something that could lead to something. So you just need to keep that so as far away from that as you can possibly get.
You don't want to do that, right?
And we talked, I believe we talked a little bit last week, the idea that that God is giving us so many things that are intended to bring us joy and fulfill us, and we can, excuse the term, bastardize those in a way to make them negative. And so rather than completely cordoning ourselves off from joy, which is kind of what culture has told us to do for decades, it's in moderation. Recognize how it's a gift intended to make us happy, and recognize how that could lead to something if it's used in the wrong way. Go ahead.
Well, you said, okay, because you said something that completely derailed me. Did you say we should pursue joy in moderation?
No, anything, any gift. I guess I probably did say moderation, but maybe not specifically to joy, but anything can be abused. Any gift can be abused, and so we cordon ourselves off if there's any inkling that it would be risk associated with that. Yeah. If you used it in the wrong way or applied it in the wrong way.
Well, take for example the gift of sex.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's wonderful. It brings joy and happiness, and it's pleasurable. But it's fire. It can be devastating.
Mm-hmm.
It can be devastating, but in the right circumstance, in the right with thanksgiving and the right, then it is one of God's greatest gifts to human beings.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all of God's gifts can be corrupted and misused. Yes.
Yeah. I do like the term corrupted because I think that's appropriate, right? It's something that's to me, and I always think about in computer terms, right? Corrupted in a computer terms means something that was working and that was correct or functional, or whatever, can no longer be used. It's been destroyed in a way that might be irreparable, and that's extreme. And I don't think that's the case for us. It's like, you can, let's stay with sex if that's okay, is that you as an individual can experience sex in a very healthy way and then subsequently experience it in a corrupted way.
Right.
And like it's not either or, it can be both.
Right. The exact same act in a different circumstance or in a different manner. Yes. Yeah. And that's the way all of it. But again, it gets all down to this: does God really want? Is God happy? Does he want us to be happy? Does he want to share us to be a part of his happiness? It's just so foundational to our view of what he's calling us to, what the benefit is of eternity and eternal life. It's such an antidote to so many criticisms of Christianity and corruptions of Christianity, that God doesn't want us to be miserable.
Right. And for people who are listening, I know this feels like we're kind of dancing all over the place on this, but as you said, it's a foundational piece that you really have to kind of start with the idea that God is happy and desires us to be happy. Because if you can't grasp that, if you can't accept that, then it's going to be really hard moving forward with our conversation.
And yes, and I want to make the note of why I use the word happy, because it's clear what we mean by happy. That it's a positive emotion, that happy people smile and they laugh. And if you use a word like joyful, well, then that's so easy to get super spiritualized.
Oh, yeah, kind of like blessed.
Like blessed, yeah. And it loses what you mean by it, right?
Yeah.
And the argument is like, well, that makes it trivial. Like, no. Happiness is not trivial at all. It's never trivial. Even a 2-year-old being happy, seeing his mother, that is not a trivial thing. It's an incredibly sacred thing to be experiencing an attribute of God.
Can I know we're up against time, but there was something that I thought of earlier that relates to what we're talking about. Because people look at happiness and joy and they're like, well, are they the same? If not, where do they intersect? And I'll throw this out. When I think about happiness, I do think that there is an opportunity to choose happiness in spite of circumstances. That like you can, it's kind of like bitterness versus gratitude, right? That there's an opportunity to choose happiness, which I think is something from Forrest Gump or something like that. But and I think about joy is almost like a spontaneous response. Like we talk about your team wins a game, and I think about joy as this spike in happiness that is not necessarily momentary, but is episodic. And it's when I think about rejoicing, it's like that feeling you have when your team won, where you're just like high on joy. That's what you get to feel like all the time.
Yeah. I'm watching our time, but maybe we do need to have one just talking about circumstances and emotions.
Mhm.
And I agree that happiness is something, because of you can have joy in spite of circumstances, yes,
Yeah.
but our joy is based on circumstances. The
Yeah.
problem is which circumstances.
Right.
And that's very, very important, and the perspective on our circumstances. um,
Mhm.
it's and I think people confuse that. They say, well, my joy is in God, not in my circumstances. Like, well, but
God is part of your circumstances.
God is part of your
Yeah.
circumstances, right? And what about your joy in God? It's that, that you're saved, or that you're going to heaven, or some of these things. Those are your circumstances. And so I think to try and divorce joy from circumstance is to rob it of its power to actually affect you.
Yeah.
If you just have it suspended in the air that has no real grounding in reality of what's happening in your life. And so we have to be carefully think about the connection there.
Now, there's another thing it just brought to mind, and I'll put a pin in it for next time, is our judgment of other people's joy or happiness as foolish.
Yeah, that's a interesting topic. Huh? Why do we think when they're super happy that we think they're foolish?
Yeah, or that the circumstances that are lending themselves to their joy, or right, are foolish. Like, why are you doing that? That's shallow, or whatever. Instead of somebody celebrating who God is and all that He's done for you, it's like, why would you respond to it that way? It's immature. It's foolish.
Right.
It's
We
unwise.
equate being happy as an adult with immaturity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's okay for a 5-year-old to be jumping up and down with joy and glee, but a 50-year-old doing that? Oh, whoa! What is wrong with you?
Yeah. Yeah, we got to talk more about that next time. It's good.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation right there. Oh, all right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have questions, I always say this. No one ever asked me a question, but I hope so. Let us know a question either on Sunday or in the comments. So if not, we'll see you guys on Sunday.
All right. Thanks, folks.